This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform. More about them later in the video. On the night of May 4th, 1889, a 43-year-old Irish-American doctor named Patrick Henry Cronin was murdered in a small, forgotten cottage at 1872 Ashland Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. Then, 2 weeks later, his naked body was found in a sewer with what appeared to be multiple wounds in his head. It was a sad and gruesome discovery, to be sure, but at first glance, it was merely another violent act in a city that was rife with them. However, the investigation that followed revealed that this was anything but an ordinary crime. As more facts were uncovered and the true tale began to unfurl, there was talk of conspiracies, betrayals, corruption, spies, crooked detectives, Irish independence, secret societies, and power struggles. Newspapers of the day feasted well on this scandal, turning Cronin's murder into one of the biggest stories in the country. His funeral became a massive and grandiose event in Chicago, bringing the entire city to a standstill as 8,000 people joined his procession, including several drum corps and a marching band. By the time everything was said and done, the media had proclaimed the killing of Patrick Henry Cronin and subsequent investigation to be the crime of the century. Welcome back to Biographics. I'm your host, Eric Malachite, and today's script was provided by Radu Alexander. So be sure to show them some love as you deploy your likes and do all the things that help keep the eldritch beast that is the YouTube algorithm going. Let's get to it. Philip Patrick Henry Cronin was born on August 7, 1846, near the town of Mallow in County Cork, Ireland. Very soon after that, his family crossed the Atlantic and relocated to New York City. After staying there for a few years, the Cronins moved around a bit, first to Baltimore and then to Ontario, where they remained until Patrick graduated with honors from the Academy of St. Catherine's. At the age of 17, Patrick Cronin was ready to leave the family nest and make his own way in the world. He traveled to Pennsylvania, bouncing around from one town to another until he found a job. He first worked as a school teacher, then as a store clerk. Neither job gave him any satisfaction, though, so he kept going west until he reached St. Louis, Missouri. The big city appealed more to Cronin, and he thrived there. He started off as a store clerk again, but used his spare time to study pharmacy and eventually opened his own drugstore on Garrison Street. His ambitions grew even larger, and he enrolled at Missouri College to study medicine, graduating in 1878 as a doctor. He continued his education at St. Louis University, where he first earned his master's degree and then his PhD. Afterward, Cronin opened his own practice and also accepted a professorship with the St. Louis College of Physicians and Surgeons. Outside of work, Patrick Cronin flourished as a cherished and productive member of society. He became a captain with the local militia. He gained a reputation as a great singer as part of his church choir, lauded for his fine tenor voice.
On the other hand, he had a tremendous singing voice.
When the 1878 World's Fair was organized in Paris, Cronin was sent to the City of Lights as one of Missouri's state commissioners. Even though everything in Cronin's life seemed to be coming up millhouse, he took a gamble in 1882 and moved to Chicago. There, things went mostly the same as they did in St. Louis. Cronin found a job at the Cook County Hospital. He then gave it up to open his private practice, which became very popular and successful. He even joined another church choir, singing at the Holy Name Cathedral. During his time in St. Louis, Cronin joined a lot of political groups, private clubs, and secret societies. He was, at one point or another, a member of the Royal Arcanum, the Royal League, the Order of Foresters, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the Knights of Pythias, the Ancient Order of United Workmen, and a few others. He may have done this because he held a genuine interest in the work those organizations did, or he may have seen this as a shrewd tactic to help his career. Cronin served as the medical examiner for many of these societies. He won the trust of their members, built connections, and gained a lot of new patients for his own practice. If you want your business to have the kind of impact that Patrick Henry Cronin had on secret societies, then you're going to need a snazzy website. And the sponsor for today's video, Squarespace, has you covered. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform, perfect for entrepreneurs and hobbyists alike. Recently, I needed to make a simple website for a tabletop RPG I'm developing and playtesting to make looking through the rulebook easier. And it was beyond simple to add sections, format, and even incorporate my existing knowledge of CSS into HTML, though you don't need any knowledge in that area at all. And it's all thanks to Squarespace's innovative Fluid Engine. The Fluid Engine makes it easier than ever for pretty much anyone to dive in and make a beautiful website, answer a few questions about the goals you'd like to accomplish with your site, choose a template, and get dragging and dropping elements onto your template. Drag and drop technology is included in every Squarespace site. But that's not all, because if you're working on a long-term project like the tabletop RPG I just mentioned, Squarespace makes it easy for you to create members-only content for your community. Monetize your projects by selling access to online courses, blogs, videos, and memberships. Start with a fully customizable website and earn recurring revenue by gating your content behind a paywall. Simply set the price and choose whether to charge a one-time fee or subscription for access. And then use Squarespace email campaigns to make it easy for you to spread the word about your project, engage clients, promote your services, and grow your business. Plus, if you're also as busy as I am, you can even set up email automations to stay connected, nurture leads, and save time. Ready to get started? Head to squarespace.com/biographics for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use offer code Biographics to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now back to the video. Out of all the groups that Cronin had joined, the one that interests us is the United Brotherhood, better known to the outside world as Clan na Gael. Still active today, it is an Irish Republican organization originally conceived as an alternative, or better yet, a substitute for the Fenian Brotherhood, who wanted a world where Ireland was free from under the British Crown. Many former Fenians had joined Clan na Gael during the late 1860s and 1870s, because their previous group had lost support following a series of ill-conceived raids into Canada. Since the topic of Irish independence was near and dear to Cronin's heart, he dedicated a lot of his time to Clan na Gael. As he rose through the ranks, he uncovered an unexpected hierarchy at the top of the organization. Theoretically, Clan na Gael was supposed to be run by an executive board consisting of 5 men. In reality, though, 3 of those board members, Alexander Sullivan of Chicago, Michael Boland of Louisville, and D.S. Freely of Rochester, New York, had decided to form a triumvirate of power to ensure that together they had control over the entire group. They were known as the Triangle. Going up against the Triangle seemed like a foolhardy idea. Entire chapters, or camps as they were called, had been disbanded because some of their members tried to speak up against the 3 men sitting atop the United Brotherhood, and yet Patrick Henry Cronin took up the cause. He began openly criticizing the Triangle and the power they wielded. After a few years, he had become the de facto leader of an unofficial anti-Triangle faction within the Brotherhood. The biggest gripe that Cronin and his followers had with the Triangle was their dynamite war in Britain. As we said, most of the members of Clan na Gael were former Fenians, so they had no problem making their point with violence. At first, the organization was mostly responsible for funding and supplying its sister group across the pond, the Irish Republican Brotherhood. But then, when Sullivan came to power, he decided it was time to be more proactive and began sending his own men to the United Kingdom to conduct their own bombing campaigns. Whether or not Cronin approved of such tactics, we can't say. His primary objection to Sullivan's strategy was that it was a complete disaster and a massive waste of money. Many of the bombs failed to detonate. Those that did sometimes killed the men planting them. But most of their revolutionaries were caught before setting anything off. Between 1881 and 1885, 29 members of Clan na Gael were arrested and convicted, most of them getting life in prison. The huge failure rate would have suggested a spy in their midst. Which was true. A prominent member of Clan na Gael, Henry LeCarron, was actually Thomas Beach, an English spy who had been supplying the British government with information since the days of the Fenian Brotherhood. But he will become relevant a little bit later. For now, there was discontent against the Triangle for misuse of funds. The resentment grew considerably in 1885 when the executive board tried to squeeze more money out of the local camps, claiming that the organization was in debt. But just a few years earlier, there was $250,000 in the treasury, around $8 million in modern currency. Cronin and his allies demanded to know where all that money went. As you would imagine, this made him public enemy number one in the eyes of the Triangle, particularly Sullivan, since both he and Cronin were Chicago residents. At first, the leadership of Clan Nagale thought they could simply ignore him and he would go away like many others did. But Cronin persisted, and his influence kept growing. Eventually, he could be ignored no longer, so in 1885, the Triangle went on the attack. Cronin had read to his local camp a letter that had been written by the leaders of a camp from New York, which had been expelled from Clan Nagale, accusing the Triangle of wrongdoings. Apparently, this was not only against the rules of the secret society, but enough to get Cronin charged with treason and put on trial. Not a real trial, mind you. We mean a trial within the organization.
Totally illegal, by the way.
You might think this was a flimsy charge, but it didn't really matter when the committee presiding over the trial consisted solely of allies of the Triangle. This included Detective Daniel Coughlin of the Chicago PD, who will later play a part in Cronin's disappearance. Unsurprisingly, Cronin was found guilty and expelled from Clan Nagale. Surely the Triangle thought this would be the last they would hear of Patrick Henry Cronin. But exactly the opposite happened. Many members of the secret society rallied around Cronin. They abandoned Clan Nagale and began forming their own camps that were pro-Cronin and anti-Triangle. Soon enough, other Irish-American groups got involved in the feud as they were forced to choose sides. The conflict reached its peak in 1888 when Cronin personally accused Sullivan of embezzling $100,000 from the society's coffers. By this point, the quarrel had been going on for years. It was public, it was messy, it was costly, and some people had had enough. There were influential men on both sides who considered that it was time to reach a peaceful resolution, so an agreement was made. A committee of 6 people, 3 from one side, 3 from the other, including Cronin, would investigate the accounts and the records of Clan Nagale from 1881 onwards to see if Sullivan and his cohorts were guilty of embezzlement. From the beginning, Cronin suspected treachery. He received death threats, so as a precaution, he took extensive personal notes of the secret trial. When it was time to vote, one of his supposed allies defected to the other side, and the Triangle were found not guilty 4-2. Cronin wanted a report with all the evidence to be published and sent to every camp, but the committee said no. The others insisted that all notes and records of the trial be destroyed, but Cronin refused to surrender his personal notes. He threatened to go public with them, and he kept making these threats up until the day of his disappearance. Unfortunately for Cronin, the Triangle had gained more ammunition against him. By late 1888, Henry LeCarron had exposed himself as a British spy and returned home to England to give evidence against Clan Nagale and their allies in the UK. During his time undercover, LeCarron had been a close associate of Sullivan and an ardent enemy of Patrick Cronin, so he intimated that there might be other spies within Clan Nagale and that Cronin was one of them. Rumors and accusations that Cronin was a spy swept through Chicago, undoubtedly nurtured by the Triangle and their allies. Some argued that Cronin and LeCarron were enemies, so they couldn't be spies together. Others thought the exact opposite, that it was more likely that 2 secret allies would pretend to be at odds with each other, so they could gain information from both sides. Ultimately, everyone believed what they wanted to believe. But this might have been the nail in the coffin for Cronin. Spies and traitors of secret societies did not tend to live long and happy lives. On the evening of May 4th, 1889, Patrick Cronin was with a patient in his office, in the rooms he rented from Mr. and Mrs. Conklin above Chicago's Windsor Theater. He had lived there so long that the Conklins had become not just close friends, but almost like family. Cronin was just about to dismiss his patient and leave for a meeting when a stranger rang the bell, desperately asking to see the doctor. He stressed that it was a matter of life or death. From the snippets of dialogue that the Conklins heard, it seemed that the man had rushed from O'Sullivan's ice house at Lakeview, where a worker had suffered a terrible accident and was on the brink of death. Dr. Cronin gathered his surgical bag and left with the stranger in a buggy, never to be seen alive again. The following day, his friends alerted the police of his disappearance. Supposedly, the authorities investigated, but the man put in charge of the case was Detective Daniel Coughlin, a close ally of the Triangle. According to the police, they found no trace of Cronin, or any signs that anything criminal had taken place. It was nothing more than a ruse so he could flee Chicago and begin a new life elsewhere, presumably under a different identity. These ideas first appeared after a young woman named Annie Murphy claimed to have seen the doctor in a streetcar hours after leaving his house. Her assertion was corroborated by the conductor of said streetcar, William Dwyer. Of course, both were wrong since we know for certain that Cronin was murdered that night, and a little bit of digging into their background suggested they were unreliable witnesses. Annie Murphy's father was a member of Clan Nagale, while Dwyer conveniently took an extended trip to Canada for his health a few weeks later when Cronin's body turned up. While the Chicago PD was ready to close the books on the fate of Patrick Cronin, the police in neighboring Lakeview thought differently. Back then, Lakeview was still an independent city, and their police captain, who had no affiliations with Clan Nagale or any other Irish-American groups, was convinced that a murder had occurred in his neck of the woods. He didn't know who the victim was, but knew for certain that something nefarious took place on the night of May 4th. The following morning, they had found a large trunk with bloodstains and dark brown hair inside. Clearly, it had been used to transport a body. Lakeview police scoured the area surrounding the place where the trunk was recovered, but to no avail. It wasn't until May 22nd that Public Works employees investigated a clogged sewer and made the gruesome discovery. It was the naked body of a man with a towel tied around his neck and cotton batting thrown over him to conceal him. And for those of you who don't know what cotton batting is, that's like the inside of a mattress. The identity of the murdered man was not difficult to establish. He had the same height and build as Patrick Cronin. He was wearing an Agnus Dei medallion like the doctor did. He had a malformed right-hand finger like the doctor had, and most convincingly, Cronin's dentist recovered the corpse's gold fillings as the ones he fitted to the missing physician. There was also little doubt over the cause of death. Cronin's head was described as a mass of wounds, with multiple cuts and strikes, both sharp and blunt. Dr. Gray, who examined the body, wrote in his report, "There are 5 wounds. Number 1 is on the front parietal suture, just here. That could easily have been fatal in itself. Number 2 is on the vertex, to the right of the sagittal suture. The skull is not strong there, and a heavy blow would be fatal. The 3rd wound is 1/2 inch posterior to number 2. The 4th is on the left temple, and is only 1 inch long. The rest are about 1.5 inches in length. The 5th is a crushing wound, immediately below the external angle of the left eye. This one fractured the cheekbone, and must have been delivered with great force." The absence of defensive wounds on the hands indicated that the first blow caught Cronin by surprise and that it was strong enough to knock him out, if not kill him outright. Another examining doctor suggested that the sharp wounds were made with an ice pick, while the heavy ones were likely delivered with a blunt axe. God, it just reminds me of Fargo.
Yeah? Oh, jeez.
The funeral of Dr. Patrick Cronin became the most attended and most ostentatious in the city's history since the state funeral of Abraham Lincoln 2.5 decades earlier. His casket was made of metal overlaid with French walnut, mounted with gold and ornamented with silver flowers. The top of the casket had heavy gold knobs, 2 silver rails running along the sides, and a massive silver plate in the center. 4 Knights of St. Patrick dressed in full garb with their swords drawn guarded the casket. Around 12,000 people came to pay their final respects. Thousands more joined the procession the following day when the casket was taken to Calvary Cemetery. So the remains of Patrick Cronin were laid to rest, but one question still remained. Who killed him? So, also like Fargo, Cronin's killers didn't do a very good job of covering their tracks. In the days following the discovery of the body, the authorities uncovered evidence implicating several men. First, they found the house where the doctor met his ghastly end. It was an empty cottage in a secluded area close to the home of Patrick O'Sullivan, the guy with the ice house used to lure Cronin to his doom. The bloodstains inside the place left little doubt as to what had occurred there. There was a half-assed attempt to cover them with paint, but the blood was still clearly visible in many spots around the house. Suspected of being involved, O'Sullivan was questioned by the police. He stated that he saw two strange men around on occasion. Even though they had rented the cottage, they never actually moved in, just showed up from time to time and spent little time inside the house. The man who rented the house gave his name as Frank Williams to the owners, the Carlson family. Inside the cottage was some broken furniture, likely damaged during a fight. On the back of a dresser, there was the mark of an A.H. Revel & Company furniture house. Their records showed that a man by the name of J.B. Simmons bought all the furniture along with a large trunk. Williams was later identified as Martin Burke and arrested while traveling to Canada, while Simmons turned out to be a guy named Patrick Cooney. Both men were known associates of O'Sullivan, so the idea that he had no idea who they were didn't really hold water. The ice house owner was further implicated in the plot by the Carlsons. They claimed to have seen O'Sullivan speak several times to their mysterious tenants, and that at one point he even vouched for them, guaranteeing that they would pay their rent. It certainly seemed like they were on friendly terms with each other. The fourth man who was implicated in the conspiracy was Detective Daniel Coughlin of the Chicago PD. He was the one who rented the horse and buggy used to transport Cronin the night of his murder, and it was the stable owner, Patrick Dinnan, who dobbed him in. A buddy of Coughlin's, John Kunza, was identified as the man who drove the buggy. A wave of arrests followed. All these men were brought in, all except Cooney, who managed to flee the country in time and was never heard from again. The other four, O'Sullivan, Burke, Coughlin, and Kunza, were all charged with Cronin's murder. Several more associates and members of the same Clan na Gael camp were eventually arrested. This even included Alexander Sullivan, leader of the Triangle, but these men all had the charges against them ultimately dropped due to a lack of evidence. The trial became an absolute sensation, not just in America but also in Europe, particularly in the UK. The newspapers covered every aspect of the trial that went on for 3 months. Nobody ever confessed or turned on each other, but the four original defendants were all found guilty. Kunze was seen as playing a minor role in the whole affair. He was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 3 years, but he was granted a new trial on appeal and was acquitted. The other 3 were all convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. By the way, I am using Kunze as in the German pronunciation of that last name. I'm assuming that he's probably a first-generation German immigrant, so that's why I'm using that pronunciation. Plus, there's already a Kunz in it, so he would sound the same, and so it's more for differentiation of these two characters in the story than anything else. O'Sullivan and Burke didn't fight their convictions, and both died behind bars. Coughlin, the detective, however, filed an appeal, arguing that the jury was prejudiced against him. After years of trying, he was granted a new trial, and he was acquitted. There were rumors that he or his associates successfully bribed the jury, or maybe the evidence against him simply wasn't as strong as the others, although, as we said, nobody confessed. The common belief was that Coughlin wasn't present for the actual murder. Burke and Cooney were the ones who did the deed, possibly assisted by O'Sullivan, but Coughlin's role was likely limited to that of hiring the buggy, which he claimed he did as a favor for an acquaintance of his brother named Thomas Smith. His lawyer successfully argued that Coughlin might not have known what was to take place on that fateful night. Anyway, don't worry, because the detective didn't get a happy ending. After gaining his freedom, he opened a saloon in Chicago, but was once again arrested and indicted for bribing a juror in an unrelated case. Look, you can't fix stupid. Coughlin fled the country and traveled to Honduras, where he supposedly worked as a contractor before dying of tuberculosis. As for Patrick Cronin, he was remembered as a martyr and a hero who died fighting corruption. Sullivan's true role in his murder was never fully established, and the Triangle were never held to account. Even so, the Cronin case caused a huge backlash against secret societies. Clan na Gael was a shell of its former self, splintered and divided. It remained that way for over a decade before it was finally reunited again in the early 20th century under new leadership, with the tale of Dr. Cronin against the Triangle a permanent dark stain on its past. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment a historical figure we haven't covered yet, subscribe and ring that bell, and share this video with someone who loves learning about history's most important people. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.